get it done and get it fixed, because there are going to be a lot of issues that will involve, on a big community, that will involve a lot of money. The contractor, the developer are responsible, according to the Florida statute that Patrick Howell will talk later on, for some of those repairs and those actions that have to be needed. So the first step will be, yes, you start seeing some issues. Yes, I receive a property, and then let me hire an engineer to go out there, look at the buildings, do some testing, evaluate, and tell me what is wrong. If something is wrong, tell me what is wrong, and so we can negotiate with the developer before doing the full turnover of the properties. I believe Patrick Howell can then talk to, once we do that step, then the attorney will begin.
Yes,
Sir?
so Patrick, tell us a little bit about what a community needs to look for in regards to hiring an attorney for a construction defect claim now that they know that they have a possible defect.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Hector. Patrick Howell here with Becker and Polyakov. You know, the first thing that I'm going to mention is board certification. I'm a board certified construction lawyer in the Orlando office. Scott Kiernan, who works with me, is also a board certified construction lawyer. And I think that's the very first thing to look for, because no matter what sort of deal you think you're getting on your fees or contingency or any of that, none of that matters unless you have a lawyer that knows what they're doing with your case, with your claim, and with the litigation that may erupt if the claim isn't settled very early on. So that's number one. What is board certification? Board certification is the way that the Florida Bar tells the world that a lawyer has an expertise in a certain area of law. So if someone is coming to you and says, yes, I'm a construction lawyer, and then you ask them, are you board certified? And they say no, they may be a construction lawyer, they just aren't an expert construction lawyer. What goes into board certification is you first have to have a certain number of years experience, 10 years experience in the area of law that you're working in. So for instance, I had to show to the Florida Bar that I had been a construction lawyer for 10 years before they even let me sit for the test or be considered for board certification. That's step number one. Step number two is once you meet that threshold, then the bar will actually ask for a list of lawyers that you've practiced with and lawyers that you've practiced against. And they will actually contact them and ask them questions about your professionalism, your abilities in a courtroom, your abilities in mediations and other legal areas. So they get all of that information. They ask those lawyers that are actually contacted to provide them a list. And so it goes on and on and on. So it's funny, during the process, I got contacted by dozens and dozens of judges and lawyers and all these people. Hey, I just wrote you a recommendation, for your board certification. They weren't necessarily on my list, but they were on the list of the list. So once they get all that information, they review it, they don't see anything that's problematic, then they let you sit for the exam. And so the year that I took the board certification exam, there was a 47% pass rate. I passed. So it was not an easy test. Very good lawyers that have lots of experience in this area of law have failed the exam. So that's the number one thing that I would say to look for in a lawyer. Board certification. Then from there, everything else can be figured out, because you may want to have, instead of an hourly fee agreement, you may want to have a contingency fee agreement. Well, my firm, most firms that are doing construction law and litigation now are offering a contingency arrangement. So if that's something that your board needs or wants, certainly talk with your lawyer about that. The other thing is, do they have the resources? You know, ask them how many lawyers practice in this area in Florida. So as a for instance, with my firm, we have 22 construction lawyers that practice in this area. And that doesn't include construction law paralegals, support staff, and all of that. These cases can be very, very, very large and very, very complex. So let me give you an example of what we're talking about. I have a case that until recently, because the judge took it off of the docket because of COVID, was going to trial on July 13th. So there were deadlines that were assigned by the judge and for all of the different parties. In the case, we had on the other side of us a developer entity, and then we had about 22 subcontractors. It ended up getting narrowed down to about 8 or 9 by the time that we got to the trial period, but it's a lot. And we got from all of those different other parties, there was a deadline for filing dispositive motions, meaning motions for summary judgment, et cetera. We got the information on that, and on that deadline day, we had 42 motions to respond to from different parties. Motions for summary judgment, motions in limine, as they're called. So if that had come to a law firm, you know, with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 10 construction lawyers, that wouldn't have been enough. So we had to do an all hands on deck. We had to send out to everyone 2 motions. Said, look, you got to, you know, work on these and handle them. We did that, and we were able to meet the deadlines, get everything turned in. The number one thing that you've got to show the other side in a case like this is that you've got the ability to go to trial. And if they see any weakness, if they see any problems, you're asking for extensions. Oh, I can't get this done in time. You know, can I have an extension of time? We don't do that. So ask your lawyer also if they've got the resources, you know, to stand up to large developers, because the developers are hiring the best law firms in town. They are, and they're going to throw everything they can at your law firm to get you to settle. So you've got to have a law firm that's going to be able to throw it back just as hard.
Awesome, Patrick. Thank you. So now you've got your lawyer. Tell me about the 558 claim, what that means, and what happens next.
Yes. So, you know, what was discussed by Hector, you know, as part of the investigation, you know, so his part of the investigation is the property manager looks at stucco and says, why is this cracking? You know, why is it cracking right underneath the windows? What, you know, I saw 1 crack last year, and then I saw 10 cracks 6 months ago, and now I see 100 cracks today. You know, so what's going on? So Hector comes in and says, you've got a problem with your stucco. So Hector comes out, he looks at the process. By then you may have already had a lawyer involved because you say to yourself, we've got to get somebody out here. We've got to get help. And so through that process, you may have already retained an attorney. Hector provides the information that we then turn into the 558 claim letter. Okay. So what 558 is it's a statutory provision that the Florida legislature passed, I guess about 17 years ago at this point. And what it requires is that prior to filing a lawsuit for construction defects, you have to actually put the developer, the contractor, the subcontractors all on notice of what the defect is, what it's claimed to be, and provide a description of it, the statute says, in reasonable detail. So Hector provides that reasonable detail in his engineering report, okay? So that is attached to our letter. We send that letter over to the developer. We send it to the contractor. We send it to all the subcontractors that we can find. And they have an opportunity to inspect the property with their own engineers and respond to the 558 letter. Now, a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, Patrick, you know, we don't want these repairs to be done by, you know, ABC contractor. You know, they did a bad job the first time. Why would we have them out to inspect and then give us an offer to fix everything? You have to allow them to inspect and give you an offer. You don't have to accept the offer. Okay. So that is the process. Now, sometimes it will result in a settlement. You know, we've had situations before with some of the larger home builders where they've gotten our 558 letter and they've said, Uncle, you know, we want to figure this out with you. And so without filing suit at all, we've sat down and we've gone through the process. We've walked the property, you know, with people like Hector and figured out exactly what the fix is. And that builder has brought in their own engineers. They may have brought in some of their subcontractors as well. Everybody figures out what the fix is, and either there are repairs or there are repairs and money, or maybe there's just money paid. So that's the process that has to be done prior to filing the lawsuit. Now, one of the other questions that comes up is people will tell me, Patrick, we don't, you know, this place is 9.5 years old because there's a 10-year statute of repose. In other words, a limitation on when you can bring a construction claim. And it begins to run 10 years after the date the property is finished up, buttoned up. So we'll have people come to us and say, I think our statute of limitation, you know, runs next week. We don't have time for this 558 process. We can actually file the lawsuit and institute the 558 process simultaneously if we have to protect the statute of limitations and make sure that the claim is filed on time. What we do is we just put a pause on the case while the 558 process is actually completed. And there's case law that allows us to do that. And it's actually written into the statute that way. So that's the 558 process, the process that has to be done prior to litigation and being started.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So additional claims, you know, Hector's come out, he's put together an evaluation of the property and what you believe to be a construction defect. What about additional claims?
Additional claims. So there, besides the construction defect claim, there can also be claims that involve other issues that are related to turnover. So for instance, I had a client that came to me, and it's an Orange County community, and it's gated. So they came to me, they said, we've got these problems, you know, we've got an engineer that's going to do everything. Here's the engineer's report, looked at it, it wasn't that much money. So I started asking more questions. I said, when did you guys turn over? How much money is in your reserve accounts? Reserve accounts, there's not hardly anything in our reserve accounts. Okay, well, let me look at your declaration. We looked at the declaration. We determined they were an Orange County gated community. Orange County requires that gated communities set up these reserve accounts, and the developer has to fund them prior to turnover. So we ended up calculating everything, brought in an expert CPA, and they ran numbers based upon the reserve accounts and based upon the reserve studies that were done prior to turnover. And they were due over $1 million to their reserve accounts. So they came to me with the construction case, and that was something we had to deal with. But they also had this other claim as well for lots of money that was owed to them, that if they had gone to an attorney or a lawyer that didn't know about these other claims, they would have left $1 million on the table. So there are other issues, there are other claims that are important. You may have amenities issues. You may have a situation where the golf club is owned by someone else. Those are intricate issues, and how those are dealt with after turnover. You definitely have to have someone with expertise that can handle those. So there can be lots of ancillary issues to a construction claim.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That's beneficial information. I'm sure people don't think about that when they're going into a construction defect. So now we know we have a construction defect. We've picked our attorney. This is where I&E comes in and saves the day almost. Chris, you want to elaborate on what happens with destructive testing?
I will elaborate on saving the day for sure. So, well, let's talk about what destructive testing is first. So Patrick did a great job of kind of outlining the process, and really is it's an evaluation process that's typically focused on the building envelope. So if you have window leaks and roof leaks, and then like Patrick mentioned, a bunch of stucco cracks and stuff, it's really going out and figuring out why. And it really aims to systematically identify the deficiencies, like in whole or in part, that have contributed to not only water intrusion, but also property damage. And that's really where the destructive testing comes in. So we as a contractor will work with an engineer like Hector to go in and basically remove portions of cladding that could be, you know, like a fiber cement lap siding, or it could be cutting open stucco and really identifying what the concealed barrier looks like and how is it, you know, managing incidental water that's gotten behind the first barrier of the cladding and such. So basically, we as a contractor can come in with a crew of guys that are really experienced with working in an occupied space. And so that's really important because unlike new construction, we're experts in working in that occupied space. We know people are home. We know babies are sleeping during the day. We literally just dealt with this yesterday where a homeowner, we knock on the door and we say, hey, the engineer is going to be opening up some, going to have us open up some stucco below a window. And I noticed that that window is a bedroom, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, no one's in there sleeping, and that we don't want to disturb anybody. We want to have as little impact as possible because it's, you know, again, it's not like new construction where nobody's living there. So that's really where I&E shines, is we are truly experts in working in that space. So we're extra clean. We put down drop cloths. If we have to come into a dwelling unit to do, let's say, a window test where we have to remove drywall under a window and put up pressure chambers and stuff so that Hector can evaluate if that window's working properly or not. We'll put down runners and put up plastic walls. And right now, because of COVID-19, we'll wear full Tyvek suits and masks, of course, and stuff. So one thing to note that I think it's really important that CAMs understand and they convey with their board and the owners is that these are very fluid investigations. I've been doing this a long time, and I think maybe once in 15 years have been given you know, a diagram of, hey, Chris, this is exactly where we're going to do our opening. So we don't know the addresses, we don't know what windows are going to be selected, we don't know what walls are going to be opened up, we don't know the size of the openings. And this isn't because the engineers are lazy or anything like that. It's because it's a very fluid, evolving process. And so we will oftentimes open up, let's say, below a window so that Hector can evaluate if the concealed barrier components are properly installed, or maybe they're mislapped, or maybe the window wasn't fastened properly, maybe it's missing sealants, all kinds of stuff. And then he finds damage and then says, okay, well, we need to chase this damage. We need to understand how extensive is this? And all of this data that's being collected by my guys opening everything up and Hector collecting that data then goes to Patrick, and Patrick takes that data and, you know, basically says, look at the problems that you guys caused. You know, we're going to finish this evaluation and determine how much it's going to be to fix this. And so it's super critical that the contractor knows how that process works and doesn't get in the way of the engineer, but also is able to be fluid enough and have enough manpower and equipment and tools to move fluidly through the investigation. When the investigation's done, that's where our real work comes in, because then we got to put all this back. And one thing that's important to note, and the whole reason, you know, my diatribe here of telling you how the DT works is because it's not like you can go and say, okay, board and homeowners, we're going to pick that unit, and that's Tammy's unit, and Tammy, we're going to open up all kinds of stuff on your unit, and we're going to need to get inside and stuff, and they don't know, you know, so it can get a little intense for us, because then we're putting the stuff back. But one thing to also note is that it's temporary in nature. So our put back, we're not going to like repair a bunch of wood and stuff, and we're not going to chase damage or chase defects, because that can get very, very, very expensive very, very fast. And so instead, they're temporary in nature, but where we shine as well is in that stucco putback. So we're really good at like blending like stucco textures and priming and painting and stuff. So when you look at where that opening was, even though we didn't know the day before, when you look at it, you know, after a few days of having us put it back, then rarely can you tell. Sometimes you can, but that's because the wood or something is so bad in the wall that there's not a lot we can do. But we do our best to really work hard to make it look good. And one of the main reasons is, and Patrick and Hector know all about this, is because these lawsuits can go on for maybe 2-3 years, sometimes 4 years, sometimes longer, depending on the complexity of the lawsuit. So we do our best to match as much as possible. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the DT. And if any of you CAMs online here have been through a destructive testing, I think you end up hearing the word DT and destructive testing like you hear it in your dreams. I mean, you hear it so much. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
So we've done destructive testing now, and I have, as a CAM, all of these homeowners calling me, I have leaks happening currently. What am I supposed to do about those if they are pertaining to the construction defect?
So let me tell you what not to do. And this really is important. You don't want to call your like typical maintenance guy or like your painter buddy or whoever to come out and, you know, do a repair. Let's say you know, a little roof leak pops up and one of your unit owners sees a stain in their living room. You don't want to call your buddy and just say, hey man, come out and just see if you can get that fixed. And there's a couple of reasons why. Patrick can speak to this better than I can, but you don't want to spoil the evidence during this lawsuit. So the proper notifications must go out, and then the repairs need to be documented properly. So a couple of things have to happen. And I&E actually shines in this area because we go really a step beyond what a maintenance guy or a Chuck and a truck is going to do. We're going to actually give you a work order form at the end of the DT. And so it's a whole little packet. And so what happens at the end of the destructive testing is we basically say, hey, here's a matrix that shows you where the openings are and what the claddings were. And so if a leak pops up, we'll know if it was around that area or not. And we'll also, then you have a record forever of where these leaks popped up. And that not only helps you as a CAM to stay hyper organized and just really know the extent of the leaks and the damages in your community, but it also is going to help Hector and Patrick use that data through the life of the lawsuit. And so it's a real, for me, I look at it as a real advantage. It's a little more work up front, but it's a real advantage through the whole lawsuit. And so the work order form, you fill it out, you send it over to us, and then we notify Patrick, and then Patrick gets the proper notifications out to defendants or whoever he has to legally do that. I mean, Patrick, you can speak to it better than me, but in a nutshell, we're going to give you basically the form, you fill it out, we help you work with Patrick and the engineer to get the notices out to the defendants and everybody. And then where we really come in and where we really shine is that we're going to document that, the work that we do, we're going to document that in a way that's, we're going to be able to hand over that data, hand over the photographs. We don't do reports or anything because we're not the consultant, but we're going to hand over those photos to the engineer and to Patrick. And in the event that it's an absolute emergency leak and there's just no time to get the proper notice out to Hector, let's say Hector's doing a massive survey the next day and just couldn't get out, I'll still be able to hand over that data to Hector and to Patrick. And so it's a kind of a safety net. I like to look at it as kind of a safety net for the engineer and for the attorney. We're also really used to, I think Patrick, you mentioned that on one of your files, they have 22 defendants. Well, every single one of those defendants typically has their own engineer, and they're all pointing fingers at each other. And so they're all going to want to come out and watch us do our work. So we're really good at working around, these 20 guys that every single one of them wants to use our ladders and lifts and everything. So we're used to that. And so a lot of contractors aren't. And so they'll come in and get frustrated and move everybody out of the way and quickly do the work without, one, documenting it, and two, letting other people see it so as to not spoil the evidence. As I think am I saying that right, Patrick? It's spoliation.
You are. Yeah. And just to springboard off of that, the letter that we send is called a spoliation letter. So, the word is spoil, but that's a legal concept. Spoliation of evidence is when a defendant actually uses your repair as a defense to the lawsuit. And what they'll say is, Judge, we never got a chance to come out and look to confirm that that was a defect. They went ahead and made the repair. They covered everything up. They didn't take a photograph. They didn't let me know to come out and look at it. And so we have a defense to this. And it's a valid defense. So with this process, it doesn't mean that the owner and the property manager can't make repairs. It's just that there's a process. And that process is to make sure your lawyer knows, make sure Chris knows, and make sure Hector knows. And then we'll develop a strategy for addressing that. The other thing that may occur is there are permanent repairs and there are temporary repairs. And so what you may see a lot of is temporary repairs, especially things like the roof, that you want to have a comprehensive fix. If you find out that there are roof leaks in several locations, Hector looks at it and says, guys, this was done wrong. Here's why. We may want to hold off on making any sort of definitely permanent repairs, maybe even temporary repairs. We may tarp some areas. So we may bring Chris out and say, hey, we got 3 leaks, these 3 buildings, let's tarp those buildings. What happens then is we'll let the other side know. We'll let the subcontractor for the roof, we'll let the contractor know that's over the entire job, and we'll let the developer know. They'll come out and they'll actually look at those roof leaks, and they can confirm what the issues are as well. Then we'll fight about it in court as to what the reasons are. But giving them an opportunity to look is very, very important. With stucco, one of the things that may happen is you may have all these cracks, and as the property manager going, we got to do something. We got to do something. We can do something, definitely. And it may be that Chris comes in and does some temporary patching. Put some. I'm going to use the wrong word. I know that there's a difference between caulk and sealant, and Chris is going to tell me which one is which. But we'll put some sort of a sealant, in the cracks temporarily to stop the water from coming in. But it's not something that has pulled out the stucco. Doesn't make it so that the other side can't look at it and see what the problem is. So that process is very, very important. And if you've got your board president saying, we got to get these buildings painted, make sure that you give your lawyer a call before that happens, because you may see those buildings with their pretty paint job, with lots of holes in them from destructive testing and things like that later on.
And something that we haven't, we all talk about the big part, the roof is leaking, the window is leaking, we see stucco damage and stuff like that, but there are also, and it should be part of your turnover report or the report the engineer provide, there's also smaller stuff that we have to evaluate and make sure that they're working. For example, all of the units or most of the units are having problem with water pressure, or the faucet are not working and all of the lines are getting clogged up. All of that has to be documented as well. That is part of that turnover process. It's not only the physical part of the structure, the structural part, those other small things. One of the things that you should receive from your engineer, and something that we provide, is like a small list of things, and we distribute that to all of the owners, because the owners and the board members are the ones that are there 24/7. I may go out there and spend a week on a property, but you guys are there every single day. You are the ones that see every single issue. So we give you that out. We give you a dateline. Okay, tell me everything that's been going on, and then we evaluate. Okay, out of 100 buildings, 75 have problem with the faucet. 100% of them have problem with the doors. They're falling apart. So those are kind of items that we haven't talked about between Patrick or Chris. We're talking about the big thing, but those smaller things also affect, and it's part of your turnover study that we should all have it as part of the information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for CAMs that don't really know, some CAMs don't have the privilege of having a turnover for community. When you go from developer ran community, you do what's called a turnover to the association. And during that turnover, you're going to have a certified engineer come in and do an evaluation of all of the assets for the community, so that upon turnover, both parties can equally say everything is good or everything is not good.
Correct. Also, please remember that it should be evaluated the street, the sidewalks. You got settlement on sidewalk, you got damage on the curbs, you got ponding issues that it should be addressed. The slope to the buildings should be evaluated as well. So there's a lot of detail that goes involved on a turnover or a construction defect part. And and I'm following Patrick's line here, a good engineer firm that is dedicated to doing this, that they have been doing it for years, will be a lot easier than grabbing the guy that recently graduated and started on such and such company. A company that has years of experience, have people in their background working and looking at details, will be a lot easier, not only for the initial investigation phase, but when it goes to court, an attorney like Patrick will say, well, I got the big guns here. This guy will come out here and he will tell them how it is. So those kind of things, it has to be evaluated as well when you hire an engineer.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've seen many times is I've seen a client or a potential client that will say, Patrick, come out here and look at this, and so I'll come out there with an engineer or with a contracting company. And, we're looking around at the issue that they're focused on. And then we realize, by looking around, well, what about this? And what about this over here? And what about that? And so that's the other part of this is, if you've got one thing and you think to yourself, it's just one thing, bring somebody in and have them look, because it's typically never just one thing. And so if you've got a contractor or developer that has built a place and, there's widespread flooding and whatnot because of grading issues, there's probably something else going on too. If they cut corners in that one area, they may have cut corners in another area as well. So, get somebody out, have them look at it, but also tell them, hey, listen, while you're out here, look around at everything else as well. And, if you see something else that's there, let's add it to the list. So, a preliminary walkthrough with an engineer and a contracting company is a really good idea.
And to piggyback on that a little bit, Patrick, there's a lot of times too where we'll come out where a CAM says, hey, Chris, I got this little problem, and I just want somebody to come out, take a look, and fix it. I got, I had one recently, all of the dumpster enclosure corner beads, I think it was. The stucco accessories were corroding really badly. And so we go out there, and we have a keen eye for this kind of stuff. And so if we come out and we look at an issue for you guys, maybe it's a corroded accessory, and you're just like, why is this happening? Or maybe I have this, one window leak. We're going to come out and maybe gather some preliminary information from you, help you with your problem, make that problem go away, but then also gathered a little bit of data on maybe the age of the community, and help give you some guidance on not losing your rights, like Patrick mentioned earlier, because you have a statute of ultimate repose coming up that you would have never known. And, a chuck in a truck isn't going to know that either. So, we were able to provide a little bit of guidance in that way as well.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I wanted to say real quick that's important about the statute of repose. A lot of times we will come to communities and they'll bring us in for something, and the property manager or the president will say, well, we know we're outside the statute of repose. And so I'll drill down a little bit more and ask why. Oh, well, the first phase, that first phase over there, that was finished, 12 years ago. And what they don't realize is there's actually case law that says that you go by the last phase. So the 10 years actually goes by the 10 years that the last phase of a community was finished. So we've got some communities in Central Florida that have 5 different phases, that maybe started in maybe even the late 90s, went through the 2000s, and then the last phase was finished up in 2015. You've got a situation like that, call your lawyer and have them look at it, because it may be that there's some things that can extend the statute of limitations. What I always tell people is act most conservatively about things like this. Call the lawyer because you're worried that it's going to run, but also don't make that decision yourself and say, we're not going to call the lawyer. We don't need to, because it's probably already run. Let the lawyer look at those dates and work with the engineer and make that determination for you. You may find out you've got a claim that you thought expired a long time ago.
All right, so we've got a construction defect. I've had an engineer out. I've picked my attorney. We've filed the 558. We've done the destructive testing. What happens next? When do I get my money, and when do I get to fix all of this water intrusion or just the total construction defect itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you've done that. You've gone through the process. You've had the inspections. The 558 process has finished up, and you have gotten a big goose egg from the developer, the contractors. They haven't replied to the letter in time, or they have said we dispute the claims made in the letter, whatever it might be. Then the next step is to actually file the lawsuit. So your law firm puts together that lawsuit, includes the construction defect claims, includes any other claims, maybe the missing reserve fund issue that we talked about, whatever it might be, and they file that lawsuit. From that point, you are going to go in one of 2 directions. If you're in Orange County, you're probably going to be put automatically into business court. Business court is great because you get a very quick initial sit down with the judge, and you get a trial date really quick. So it may be a year and a half in the future, but when your trial is going to be. So that's good. And there's also deadlines that are established for getting things done, like mediation, which is very, very successful in Florida for resolving cases. Deposition deadlines, discovery deadlines, all of that. The other way to go is just a regular case. In a regular case that's filed, maybe in a county that doesn't have business court, like Osceola County, that case is filed, and your attorney is going to affirmatively have to ask for a trial date. And the problem is that certain things have to happen before you ask for that trial date. So there's going to have to be discovery. There's going to have to be depositions, things like that. Then all motions that have been filed have to be taken care of and dealt with. Then when all that happens, your case is at issue, and you can ask for a trial date. So those cases that aren't in business court, those cases take a little longer, and they're a little more frustrating. But your lawyer has a tool. In Florida, there is an ability to actually have your case declared complex under the rules of civil procedure. If that happens, then you can have your case treated as if it was in Orange County Business Court. So whether it's I just had this happen in Osceola County, I filed a motion to declare the case complex. We went before Judge Schreiber, and she said motion granted, and she gave us a trial date that day at the case management conference. She set the deadline for mediation, and she set all the other deadlines in that one case management conference. judges love to be able to control these complex cases, and control and knowing deadlines and all of that is going to be very, very helpful for you. So there are tools to make sure that your case gets on a docket quickly. Now, the reality is that if your case may get moved, it may get bumped. As I mentioned earlier, I have this case that I thought was going to go July 13th, but the judge moved it because of the COVID crisis. That may happen. But guess what? All of those other deadlines that were there have already all been met. And so we had our last mediation session, April 17th. We settled out with the developer. We settled out with lots of the third-party subcontractors, and we got our client lots of money. We got a couple of holdouts that we're going to have to go to trial and get the rest of the money from them. But those deadlines were set by the case management order. We got lots of stuff done. We got mediation done. We got money for our clients, and that's what you want. You want those deadlines.
So now I have my money. Now what do I do? Where do I start? How do I pick a contractor? And is my attorney going to be there to hold my hand? Will the engineer be helping me? What do I do?
Absolutely. That is one of the questions when you're interviewing lawyers. You know, what happens through this process? We have folks all the time that come to us and they'll tell us, we got our money and our lawyers, you know, said, see ya, we're moving on to the next thing. Find a lawyer that won't do that will get you the money and then will help you through the process. So the process is reconstructing your buildings and getting them buttoned up the way that you need them to be. So it's funny. It's almost like this was planned, but you know, I just reached out to Hector. We did this with a client recently, got them some money, and I just reached out to Hector and said, hey, they need project management. And can you help us? And he was like, yes, I can. So he is going to be preparing the drawings to get everything buttoned up. He's going to do the project management, meaning putting together the bid documents so that everyone can bid. And then Chris's company is going to be one of those companies that says, yeah, we want to bid, and go through that process of filling out the bids. Hector then can help the board with picking the most responsive bidder. And then once that happens, there'll be contracts that, guess what, get reviewed by me. So there's a process that needs to be followed. And if it's not followed, it can be disastrous. So I'll give you another war story here. Just had a client that had a construction defect lawsuit. And one of our competitors got them some money and did, you know, the drop and leave. So they hired somebody to do the reconstruction process, and it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. So now they've just gone through a 5-year construction lawsuit. They brought somebody in to do the repairs. That person messed up everything, and now they need to sue them in another construction defect lawsuit. So, you know, getting your money and then getting the repairs done correctly and using a reputable contractor like INE, using a good engineer like Karnes is essential in getting, you know, everything done right. The last thing you want to do as a property manager is go through this process twice.
Or 3 times, Patrick. We are the contractor, the fourth iteration on a project right now. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I had one where, you know, I'm talking to the guy, and you know, he was like, I feel like just leaving my keys on the counter of my condo and just walking out. You know,
I've seen that happen.
Yeah, because he didn't want to go through the process again. So go through it once and go through it right.
Agreed.
Yes.
Completely agreed.
So if there's anything else that you guys want to touch on before we open up Q&A, by all means.
Just on the engineer side, questions that the owners for owners and the board members. A simple call can solve a lot of problems. A simple evaluation or just like a walkthrough that usually is not even charged. It's just, let's walk, let's see what's going on with your building. Remember, like Chris and Patrick said, we are trained for this. We see this every single day. Our eyes pick up a lot of things that probably you will not see because we see this every single day. So just a simple walkthrough, we can tell you, okay, you got problems on all this area, and it will help you greatly to see where is your next step.
Yeah, good point, Hector.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's open it up for questions from our CAMs and board members. I know that this is a daunting topic for everybody, so by all means, lay it on us. Let us know what questions you have. I mean, you can make those questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom panel. Give a couple seconds for some people to type out their questions. And while we're doing that,
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
While they're doing that, I can talk a little bit about just another step. You know, once Patrick gets you your money and you guys go through the RFP process and all of that stuff, we as an organization are pretty good at doing what we call settlement sufficiency analysis. And so, and value engineering. So that's why I love working with guys like Hector, because he's very open to saying, hey, here's the intent of my design. Here's what I want to accomplish with this. Here's why I think it's going to work. And then he's open to listening to contractors like me that can say, well, hey, this new product came out, or we just got done with this flashing detail that may be a little less money. What do you think of that? And we can work together to value engineer it and save your board money. And so even if you don't get a huge amount of money, that doesn't mean that you're totally lost and just have nowhere to go. All it means is that we have to get really creative, and we have to really explore what all the options are, and identify those options to stay within budgetary constraints. So, if you at the end of the lawsuit don't feel like, well, crap, now we just don't have enough money to do everything. So I guess we just won't do anything. Don't do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I had a presentation last night with, we had already gotten hired by the board, and the board wanted to bring us in to talk to the owners. And so we had a big Zoom meeting. There were like 80 different people that attended the Zoom presentation that I gave, and we opened it up to questions and whatnot. And we had somebody that it was obvious that she was this owner that was very against litigation. And, so one of her questions was, let's say you get us $1 million and it's going to cost $1.5 million to make the repairs. What then? You've put us in this position. And so, the first thing I said was just what Chris said, which is, well, there may be a way to, value engineer this, start with the worst building, use some of your reserves, et cetera, et cetera. So we can help you with that, and we can get you to the right contractors and engineers and whatnot to help assist you with that. And then I said, but the second part of this is, keep in mind that the litigation didn't create these defects. These defects are here. And either you're going to get those defects that are fixed by the responsible parties, by paying money, or your owners are going to do it through a special assessment. So cracks in stucco, disbonded stucco, roof leaks, cracked foundations, those don't just go away. And so if the litigation gets you $1 million and you're $500,000 short, you've got to come up with that. Well, guess what? You are $1 million ahead of the game with your owners. And so that's less of a special assessment. That's less of a loan that you'll have to take out. But that's also one of the things that's important to have as a discussion with your lawyers at mediation is, sit down before mediation and talk with Chris and say, what do we need to get this place fixed? He'll run an analysis and he'll tell you exactly what it is. And then at mediation, you go into the mediation, you know exactly what you need. And then you tell your lawyers to get it. And if they can't get it for you, then you need new lawyers.
Correct. And one of the things, and we are actually working, I had a meeting yesterday with an association. They settled on a case and now they want to fix it. Well, the same issue. We don't have enough money. So what are we going to do first? So for me as a structural engineer firm, the structure is first. I prefer to keep it standing and fix anything that is happening standing. Going with what Patrick said, you have a litigation phase that can go 3, 4, 5 years. Well, your painting cycle is 7 years. So you should have reserve funds already for painting. So forget about painting. That is out of that amount of money. So, okay, let's go with leak on the roofs. That is the first part. We want to control the water. We want to control water coming in from the windows. And those kind of evaluations we will do for you and help you and say, okay, these are what we think it should be first, second, and third. Then 10 years from now that your building is sealed, we can address 4, 5, and 6. And we do it by phases. That way you can save a little money. You don't have to get everything on time. Always, as long as it's not a safety issue, we can work on phase and it will be easier for the association. But at the same time, don't break it so much, then you will have every 2 years, you have a construction project going on the building because everybody gets tired. No one wants to continue with it, money down the drain. So get as much as you can on the first phase and then a second phase and maybe a third one and you should be done.
Good advice.
Okay, I don't see any questions coming from the audience. Do you guys have any closing statements you'd like to provide to the CAMs and the board members in regards to your services?
Well, since I started, I'll finish it. Karen's Engineer has more than 6, 7 offices around Florida. We have worked with Patrick Howell before. We have worked with different contractors, including I&E. Actually, I'm on a project right now with I&E crew, and I'm using their area. So we have a nice relationship with all of us. It's a good team, but Karen's Engineer can offer those type of service, can offer you the CA phase, and can give you advice on how to address it. I believe that one of the major problems that you will see out there, or that most association had, is they don't trust or they don't understand what the technical part of the engineering is saying. We tried, and I really tried to dumb it down as much as possible for you guys to understand, for you guys to feel comfortable when we say, okay, this repair has to be done because of this. You need to have that bonding or that relationship with your team at the end of the day, because we are your team. We are working for you guys. We're not working for anyone else but for you.
I'll jump in there. That I 100% agree with you, Hector. I mean, it really is important to have a team because you're going to be going through these things for 4 years. And if you have a team that doesn't know each other, or a team that doesn't work well together, that's not good for you. And so it's just something to consider. But so I don't really have any closing statements. I'll just tell you a little bit about like a nutshell version of I&E. So I&E Construction, we're a 25-year-old company, but we really truly focus on occupied restoration. So here in Florida, we don't do any new construction or anything. We really focus on building envelope repairs, and we do it while people are living there. And so nothing is too big or too small for us. If you have something small like a window leaking, we are more than happy to come out and help you guys figure it out. If you have a bunch of balconies that are falling off or falling down or anything you need, we're masters of that too. So please feel free to give Maya or I a call with whatever you need. And we're gonna work really hard to find the best options for you guys and work within your budgets and work within your all the constraints that you may have. So please feel free to give us a call.
All right, I guess I'm up. I guess the closing thing that I would like to say is, please email me, please give me a call if you want to talk about any of this stuff. It's not an intrusion on my day, I promise. So if you need to bring me in to talk to your board, that's going to be free of charge. If you want me to set up a Zoom meeting, we can do that. So, you know, anything that you've got a question mark about, and there's a legal question, perhaps, call me, email me, and we'll get together and we'll get the questions answered for you. It may be something where I say, look, you know, I don't know that there's anything here, or maybe I'll analyze it and say, you're outside the statute of repose. You still need to fix these things. So, you know, let's call Hector and let's call Chris, but you don't really have legal issues. And so we'll tell them that. But, you know, as a property manager or as a board president, don't make these decisions yourself. Bring in someone to help you with that. And I'm happy to do it. And I love talking to people. I love chatting via email or Zoom or whatever it is. So feel free to reach out, and you won't get a bill, I promise.
And we're talking mostly, oh, sorry, Mia.
Sorry.
No, we're talking mostly, and we dedicated a lot for turnover parts more than anything else, but this same situation, defect, it's not only attached to new construction and that turnover process. It's attached to roofing. When you do a roofing job and suddenly you get leaks all over again on the same area that you had before. It also goes with restoration projects. Yeah, we have a new balcony, and guess what? 7 years later, I have a spall right next to where they fixed it. Well, they didn't fix it right the first time. They have, that's called a secondary spalling, and you have an issue. So it's not only addressed to new development and when it's turned over to the new board and new association. It is when you do restoration. It is when you do roofing. It is when you do window replacement on a building. It goes into a lot of different areas that you should consider if I have a problem. And call us out. We will be out there. Any three of us will be out there. We'll tell you, yes, you have a problem. Let's go to the first step and let's call the engineer and let's start this rolling.
So there are a lot of cams on this Zoom meeting, and if your board members, or you feel that your board members would obtain a great amount of knowledge from watching this, we're going to be posting this recording on the Ascend website, so they'll be able to watch that for an unlimited time. And if you have any questions, I'm also going to be posting all of our panelists' contact information there as well, and feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It was a great discussion.
Thank you.
And I hope all of you benefit somehow from the information.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too.